The Queen's diamond tiara has long been more than just royal jewelry. It's been a symbol of legacy, power, and chosen succession. But when a confidential palace memo is leaked confirming its destined path not to Lilibet, but to Princess Charlotte, the monarchy faces a storm it didn't anticipate. And at the center of the outrage? Prince Harry. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. For generations, the Queen's diamond tiara represented more than elegance, it embodied continuity. It was worn during coronations, state visits, and crucial diplomatic moments that defined the legacy of Queen Elizabeth II. Those who understood the deep symbolism of this tiara knew that whoever inherited it would not just receive gemstones, they would inherit an unspoken crown of favor. Many had long assumed it would one day rest on the head of the Queen's youngest great-granddaughter, Lilibet Diana, daughter of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. It would have seemed a natural choice. Lilibet, named after the Queen herself, born during a time of division but still a direct descendant of the House of Windsor. In the months following the Queen's passing, whispers filled the royal corridors. Quiet conversations hinted at final wishes, handwritten notes, and unsealed vaults. Speculation surged, fueled by insiders and former aides, each offering fragments of what they believed to be the Queen's intent. Some believed the Queen had set aside the tiara for Lilibet in a move to heal wounds and reunify the family across continents. That idea took hold among Harry and Meghan's supporters and seemed plausible until the leak shattered that illusion, when a senior palace insider reportedly shared an internal memo with select journalists. The headlines erupted like wildfire. It wasn't Lilibet's name written beside the inheritance of the historic tiara. It was Charlotte's, Princess Charlotte of Wales, daughter of William and Catherine. The news hit like thunder. Those close to the Sussexes described a moment of stunned silence, followed by growing disbelief. How could something so symbolically tied to the Queen's personal identity be given to the heir of one branch while seemingly snubbing another? The backlash online was immediate. Debates flared about fairness, favoritism, and whether the monarchy had once again drawn a cruel line between insiders and outsiders. Supporters of the Sussexes viewed the decision as yet another institutional slight, another message that no matter how close Lilibet's bloodline, she would remain on the outside looking in. Meanwhile, sources close to Buckingham Palace quietly confirmed the decision, emphasizing the Queen's long-standing commitment to the direct line of succession. Still, questions lingered in the air like smoke. Had this been the Queen's plan all along, or had something changed in her final months? Was this an act of devotion to the monarchy's continuity, or a final rejection of the Sussex legacy? Behind closed doors, loyalties shifted and tensions simmered. The air inside royal offices grew heavier. Those tasked with handling family affairs now found themselves managing something far more volatile than tradition, emotion. But the tiara isn't just an ornament, it's a declaration. And when Prince Harry hears the news, the calm before the storm is obliterated. He once walked behind his grandmother's coffin in solemn silence. But now Prince Harry is slamming doors and making calls no one expected. The betrayal he feels runs deep, and the one thing that breaks him isn't money, rank, or even title. It's what they've denied his daughter. The news reached Harry not through an official channel, not even through a dignified family communique, but through an alert from a former staffer turned confidant. The Queen's diamond tiara, a piece so intertwined with royal legacy that its transfer is akin to a coronation in symbolism, had been quietly designated for Charlotte. Not Lilibet. Not the daughter named in honor of the late monarch, not the girl born into exile. Harry's silence was brief. What followed was a burst of emotion years in the making. Calls to private palace lines went out in the dead of night. Messages were left unanswered, or worse, returned with sterile justifications. The tiara decision had been made. There was no space for appeal. Inside Montecito, Meghan watched her husband unravel with a fury she hadn't seen since the days after their exit. The hurt was visceral, but it was the implication that Lilibet didn't belong that ignited something deeper. This was never about jewels, Harry reportedly told a friend. It's about the message they're sending her before she's even old enough to read. Conversations with aides grew sharp. Harry demanded a full breakdown of the inheritance process, who decided when and why his daughter had been bypassed. There were no satisfactory answers, just protocol, lineage, and the weight of tradition. In private, Meghan urged him to stand firm, but with caution. Her words were soft but resolute. "You've already lost so much. Don't let them erase her too." That word erase would become a trigger. In a leaked message to a royal cousin, Harry didn't hold back. "This is erasure. Of my mother, of my daughter, of every promise they ever made about unity." Those close to him said the betrayal cut so deep it reopened wounds from childhood, wounds tied to Diana's isolation, her final years, and her own denied legacy. Now, the granddaughter Diana would never meet was being cast aside with the same cold elegance. The call with Charles War, brief and deeply strained. Words were raised, accusations were made, aides reportedly had to step in to de-escalate. For Harry, it was clear he wasn't just fighting for Lilibet's place in the family, he was fighting for what remained of Diana's voice in a palace that had long tried to silence it. And as the phones went silent again, Harry's anger calcified into something more dangerous: resolve. But while Harry fumes across the Atlantic, preparations are quietly underway for Charlotte's private tiara fitting, setting the stage for a family fracture too deep to mend. Behind velvet curtains and beneath guarded palace chandeliers, Princess Charlotte was ushered into a moment centuries in the making. As her fingers touched the tiara's base, a photographer captured something no one expected: her solemn gaze, and the Queen's brooch pinned over her heart. While the world buzzed with speculation and Harry's fury simmered oceans away, deep within Windsor Castle, a private ceremony was unfolding quietly, deliberately, and steeped in ritual. There were no trumpets, no official bulletins, no audience beyond a select few. But for the House of Windsor, this was a coronation in spirit, if not in law. Princess Charlotte, just 9 years old, was led into a room charged with ancestral gravity. In Catherine's eyes, this was not a gesture of favoritism, it was the preservation of a legacy. And she was determined to make it sacred, not political. She chose to create an atmosphere not of pageantry, but of reverence. This was not simply about a tiara. It was about setting the tone for the next generation of royals. She ensured that no cameras were officially present, no stylists or press agents lingered nearby. Just family, just legacy. What few knew was that this ceremony came with something far more precious than diamonds. In Catherine's hand was a handwritten note from the Queen herself, folded with care and sealed in ivory paper. It was passed to Charlotte with silent weight. The child opened it with trembling fingers. The words, reportedly, were as brief as they were profound: "To wear this is to carry all those before you. Walk wisely." There was no grand flourish, no theatrical emotion, just Charlotte's quiet nod, her understanding far beyond her years, and her unwavering grip on the responsibility now bestowed upon her. That moment, fleeting and delicate, was meant to live only in memory. But not everyone was meant to witness it. Present in the room were only Princess Anne, the ever-steadfast guardian of tradition, and Lady Louise Mountbatten Windsor, the rising figure quietly earning reverence behind palace walls. Notably absent was Queen Camilla. Her exclusion, though never formally addressed, was understood as a decision shaped by tensions old and new. The message was not shouted but whispered in absence. This was about bloodline, not title, and yet what was intended to remain a private act of legacy soon burst into the public sphere. A photograph, discreetly taken by a palace staffer and never meant to be released, was leaked. It showed Charlotte, the Queen's diamond tiara gently resting in her hands, and over her heart, the very brooch Elizabeth had worn during her final public appearance. The image was breathtaking, it was powerful, it was divisive, and most of all it was uncontrollable. But once the first image of Charlotte in the Queen's tiara leaks, Harry's rage turns public, and so does the monarchy's internal crisis. She stayed silent when they stripped her titles, smeared her image, and erased her voice. But this time, Meghan Markle speaks, and what she reveals about the Queen's last gift to Lilibet sends royal watchers into frenzy. It began as a seemingly innocuous interview, a softly lit sit-down with a well-known American journalist. A segment originally meant to discuss motherhood, philanthropy, and Meghan's post-royal ventures. But one carefully phrased question shifted the tone instantly. Do you believe Lilibet has a place in the royal legacy? Meghan's pause said more than words could. Then came the sentence that detonated across media platforms like a firework in a storm. Some inherit jewels, some inherit silence. The interviewer leaned in, but Meghan said no more. She didn't need to. The ambiguity was deliberate, her tone sharpened by years of quiet bruising, and her delivery loaded with implication. The subtext was undeniable. Lilibet had been sidelined. Again, in the hours that followed, social media erupted. Commentators, royal analysts, and ex-palace staff all scrambled to interpret her words. And as the buzz intensified, a second revelation surfaced, a reference, almost whispered, to a letter from Queen Elizabeth herself. A private note, never before disclosed, allegedly written in the Queen's final months. Meghan didn't read it aloud, nor did she offer direct proof. Instead, she simply said, there was a promise. It just wasn't one they wanted public. It was a masterstroke of communication, subtle, surgical, and devastatingly effective. The implication was now more than emotional. It was strategic. Palace insiders were caught off guard. While Meghan hadn't made any outright accusations, the effect was the same. The narrative had shifted dramatically. It was no longer a story of Charlotte's privilege. It was now one of Lilibet's quiet exclusion. If the Queen had, in fact, left something for Lilibet, why hadn't it been announced? Why hadn't it been honoured? These questions weren't asked in whispers anymore. They were screamed across headlines. Some suspected a family cover-up. Others believed a symbolic item had been buried to avoid fueling more division. A few even hinted that Lilibet's keepsake had been reassigned altogether, and yet Meghan's words offered no clear resolution. They were riddles, provocations, echoes of past injustices cloaked in present pain. She did not name names. She did not show the letter. But in those silences, she crafted a new storm, one that threatened to consume the palace's already fragile credibility. Her message was not just for the press or for Harry's enemies, it was for the institution itself. A warning, a reminder, a reckoning wrapped in grace. As Meghan's words echo across the Atlantic, one woman inside the palace prepares to speak for the first time, Catherine. The woman at the centre of the storm has said nothing until now, but behind Catherine's carefully composed public appearances lies a storm of guilt, tradition, and whispered promises she can no longer ignore. From the moment the Queen's diamond tiara was quietly designated for Charlotte, Catherine bore the weight of that decision. It hadn't been made in haste. It had been discussed in hushed tones during quiet afternoon visits at Balmoral, years before the Queen's final days. The monarch, always deliberate, had once placed her hand gently on Catherine's and simply said, "One day, this will belong to her. You'll know when it's time." And Catherine had nodded, not out of agreement, but out of duty. That duty had now erupted into a global firestorm. And while the world debated loyalty and legacy, she lived with the knowledge that what had seemed like a sacred inheritance was now a spark lighting the fuse of a fractured dynasty. Charlotte didn't know the depth of the storm that swirled around her. Catherine had shielded her as best she could, turning the handover into a lesson in meaning, not glamour. She told her daughter the tiara was never about beauty, but about strength, that it had witnessed centuries of decisions, some painful, some bold, that by wearing it, she joined a line of women who were called to endure more than they were ever allowed to show. But as Charlotte listened with innocent eyes, Catherine could feel her heart breaking. Because in that moment she was no longer sure if she was passing down power or pain. The conflict within her was unrelenting. On one side stood the crown, its traditions, its expectations, its unspoken laws. On the other stood a brother-in-law she once admired, and a niece she had only seen in fleeting moments. Catherine had never openly criticised Meghan, nor spoken publicly about the Sussexes' departure. But she had hoped, quietly, that time would mend what had shattered. Now those hopes felt distant. The Queen's decision, once meant to be a unifying gesture within the direct line, had become a wedge. And though she had merely followed through with what was planned, Catherine could not escape the growing sense that something sacred had been lost along the way. What emerged next shocked even those closest to her. A single journal entry, leaked from a source still unknown, made its way to the press. In Catherine's own hand were the words, "Not every crown is chosen. Some are assigned, some inherited, and some we wear in silence." The tone was not bitter, but solemn. It was a glimpse into her private anguish, her awareness that she stood not just as the Princess of Wales, but as the bearer of consequences beyond her choosing. And just as telling was the quiet shift happening behind palace doors. Camilla, once seen hovering on the periphery of decisions, was now being excluded altogether. The distance between her and Catherine had grown unmistakable, and the frost between them was no longer hidden. But as the family tries to quiet the controversy, an unexpected figure steps forward, one who refuses to let history silence her any longer. She's always been the royal rock, no drama, no fuss. But this time, Princess Anne breaks her code of silence. And when she addresses the truth behind the tiara's journey, the royal family is forced to confront decades of hidden tension. In the midst of swirling accusations and rising tension, it was Princess Anne, steadfast, unshaken, and fiercely principled, who stepped in with the kind of clarity only time and duty can forge. She requested a private audience with William, choosing not to speak through intermediaries or public statements. It wasn't a plea. It was a command rooted in concern. Anne reminded him of something no one else dared to. This wasn't just about jewels or politics. It was about fracture. And if left unchecked, that fracture could turn into a permanent split. She spoke of the Queen's early conversations, those seldom discussed moments where Elizabeth had quietly confided in her daughter about Charlotte. The Queen had seen something rare in her great-granddaughter, a quiet steadiness, a kind of discipline. She believed Charlotte could carry tradition with dignity, not entitlement, but Anne didn't stop there. She acknowledged the optics, she understood the emotional gravity of the decision, and she wasn't blind to the wounds it reopened for Harry. She made her position clear. While she supported the tiara being worn by Charlotte, it should not be permanently hers. Not yet. Not while the family remained divided. The tiara, she argued, should be seen as a temporary mantle, not a possession, a shared legacy, not a trophy. Her words struck William harder than expected, because Anne wasn't just speaking to his role as a father, she was invoking his responsibility as future king. Her remarks also carried a subtle but unmistakable critique. While Anne never named Harry or Meghan directly, she questioned their choices, their method of engagement, their approach to legacy. In Anne's eyes, the monarchy wasn't a stage foe, a grievance. It was a vessel of continuity, and yet she made no attempt to diminish the pain that had unfolded. Instead, she called for empathy, for understanding, for a pause in the escalation. She reminded them all of something dangerously overlooked. The crown is not inheritance, it is responsibility. It does not belong to those who demand it, nor even to those who receive it. It belongs to those who bear it with honor. As word of Anne's intervention spread behind palace walls, it sparked both admiration and discomfort. Some welcomed her voice as the sober compass the family desperately needed. Others saw it as a veiled attempt to reclaim control from a generation drifting further from its core. But regardless of interpretation, Anne's stance was immovable. She would not let the monarchy crumble under the weight of personal vengeance or tabloid warfare. But even Anne's gravitas can't stop what's coming next, because Harry is preparing to make the most public move of his royal exile. When diplomacy fails, the gloves come off. Harry, cornered and enraged, delivers an ultimatum to the palace. For the first time in modern royal history, a prince threatens legal action over a royal heirloom, and the world watches, stunned. What had started as a private fury and then transformed into public discontent now exploded into something unprecedented. Legal documents were leaked deliberately, strategically originating from a high-profile law firm hired by Harry's team in California. The language was clear, precise, and damning. The documents alleged that Lilibet Diana, as a direct descendant of the late monarch, held a rightful interest in any personal bequests not publicly catalogued or accounted for in the Queen's last will. And then came the real demand, a full and unredacted inventory of the Queen's private collection, jewels, letters, heirlooms, alongside an inquiry into whether Pieces had been distributed contrary to verbal promises made to family members. In essence, Harry wasn't just questioning the system, he was accusing it of betrayal. Panic rippled through Clarence House and Kensington Palace alike. Advisors scrambled to assess the legal ramifications. No royal had ever taken another to court over inheritance, especially not in public view. It was an unspoken rule, a line never crossed. Until now. Some within the palace urged for immediate settlement. Others demanded a firm, united front. But no one could deny it, the scandal had detonated across every major outlet. The term Tiara War dominated headlines. Commentators questioned how a symbol of legacy had become the battlefield for a family tearing itself apart. The monarchy, already wounded by years of internal fractures, now faced a brutal legal spotlight. For Catherine, the ordeal was nothing short of devastating. She had tried to handle the inheritance with grace, dignity, and loyalty. But now, Charlotte's name was being dragged into filings, interviews, and speculative coverage. What was once a private rite of passage had turned into a global controversy, and it broke her heart. Sources close to her revealed sleepless nights, whispered worries, and growing fears that Charlotte would forever associate her most sacred family moment with division and vitriol. And behind the scenes, William attempted one last gesture, an emotional phone call to his brother, hoping to stop the descent. But Harry refused the call. There would be no more back-channel diplomacy. The time for silence had passed. The fallout was merciless. Tabloids scoured every document, resurrecting old wounds, tracing the history of royal jewels, comparing Diana's loss to Lilibet's exclusion. Opinions split down the middle. Some hailed Harry as brave, defending his daughter's dignity at all costs. Others labelled him a traitor, breaking royal code for the sake of a glittering crown. But Harry had already made peace with the chaos. He wasn't fighting over diamonds. He was fighting over recognition, over a promise he believed was buried with the Queen. He was determined to uncover the truth, no matter the price. But just as legal chaos erupts, a surprise revelation from the Queen's former personal secretary changes everything. Buried in the archives and sealed with wax was a private letter from the Queen herself, addressed not to a monarch, but to a little girl. As the final line is read aloud, the world finally understands why the tiara was never meant to divide but to unite. The discovery came when everything was unraveling, headlines ablaze, legal teams mobilized, reputations dangling by threads. In the depths of Windsor's private archive, among countless letters and legacy documents, the Queen's former personal secretary stumbled upon a sealed envelope that had somehow escaped classification. The handwriting was unmistakable, the royal cipher etched into the seal. This wasn't protocol, this was personal. The letter, preserved in its original parchment, was addressed simply to Charlotte. But what lay within wasn't a decree of entitlement. It was a message layered with intention, cloaked in love, and tethered to a dream that the world had begun to abandon. The Queen's words, read aloud in the presence of senior aides and eventually shared with the family, stunned even the most stoic. She spoke of legacy, not in the language of titles or protocol, but of unity. She praised Charlotte's quiet strength, her curiosity, her sense of discipline. But then came the postscript, the line that changed everything. "Let her wear this," the Queen wrote. "But remember, this crown was not meant for one girl. It is meant for all who carry our name, our burden, and our hope. One day it shall reach Lilibet, too." With those few words, the storm that had engulfed the monarchy began to still. What had been interpreted as an exclusion was, in truth, a plan for inclusion. The Queen, in her final years, had seen the fracture and sought to heal it in the only way she knew how, through legacy passed not with force, but with grace. The implications were seismic. The tiara's assignment to Charlotte had not been an end, but a beginning. It was a gesture of trust, not triumph, and most striking of all was what came next, not from the palace, but from Charlotte herself. In a private gathering arranged within the quiet halls of Windsor, Charlotte, young but wise beyond her years, walked to Lilibet with the tiara in hand. She asked her cousin to touch it, not wear it, not take it, just to share in the moment. And Lilibet, guided by a sense she barely understood, smiled and did so. It was a moment no camera captured, no headline exploited. But for those present, it was the most royal act either child could have made. And then, something even more profound. The tiara was placed back into its velvet casing. It would not be worn again until both girls were ready together. That decision, born not from edict but from innocence, marked the quiet reconciliation the adults had failed to achieve. Meghan wept silently. Catherine's heart, heavy with guilt, found a moment of peace. Even William and Harry, kept apart by miles and silence, seemed closer somehow, if only in spirit. The Queen's legacy, thought to be in pieces, had instead been reassembled by the hands of her great-granddaughters. The jewels were no longer a source of division. They had become the thread of redemption. But even as forgiveness blooms, one final twist awaits. A name, once erased from royal memory, resurfaces with a shocking claim. A dusty vault. A misfiled note, a sapphire brooch once worn by Diana, appears with a name in scrib. Ed on the case, for the daughter she never met. What does this mean for Lilibet, and who decided to keep it buried? As the palace reeled from the emotional crescendo of the Queen's letter and the unexpected unity between Charlotte and Lilibet, another discovery, perhaps even more haunting, would tilt the royal narrative once again. Deep within the lower archives of Kensington Palace, while conducting a routine inventory of Diana's sealed belongings for a future exhibit, a pair of archivists unearthed a velvet-lined box covered in time-worn dust. It wasn't catalogued. It wasn't labelled in any official records. But inside lay a sapphire brooch rich in colour, unlike anything previously displayed in public. What stunned them wasn't the item itself. It was the inscription etched in delicate cursive onto a polished silver plate fixed to the underside of the box. For the daughter she never met, the inscription shattered protocol. It defied explanation. Diana had died years before Lilibet was born, yet here was a message that transcended time, grief, and expectation. Speculation erupted within palace walls. Had Diana sensed somehow that a daughter would be born to one of her sons after her passing? Was this an emotional placeholder, a whispered prayer preserved in sapphire? Regardless of the original intent, the implications were undeniable. The brooch had been hidden, forgotten, or worse, kept from view by design. And now, it had surfaced at the most poetic and politically volatile moment possible. When news of the find reached Meghan, her reaction was heartbreakingly quiet. She said little, but her eyes filled with the weight of both validation and sorrow. For years, she had endured silence and suspicion, accused of stepping into a family that refused to see her or her daughter as belonging. And yet, here was Diana, reaching out in absence, leaving behind a piece of hers. LF meant solely for Lilibet. It was a wound and a balm in one. William, upon learning of the brooch, didn't hesitate. There was no press release, no public gesture. Just a quiet call. Just a message to Harry, it's yours. As it should be. The brooch was sent privately, delivered with discretion and no expectation. And when it arrived, Harry stood still, reportedly staring at the engraving for nearly an hour before placing it beside his daughter's bed. No cameras, no statements. Just the silence between generations, finally acknowledged. In a rare and private family moment, Charlotte and Lilibet were brought together again, not as symbols, not as pawns, but as children. The brooch was shown to them both. Lilibet reached out with wonder, and Charlotte nodded, as if the legacy had just become whole. It was a gesture that would never be televised, but in that moment, Windsor's two youngest heirs rewrote the royal script with innocence and grace, and in the memory of those who built the House of Windsor, the Queen, Diana, the mothers, the daughters. It was never about diamonds or crowns. It was about remembrance, about repair, about the pieces of history, once hidden, now finally brought into the light. In the end, the jewels were never about status, they were about legacy. And for the daughters of Windsor, that legacy has only just begun. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.